Welcome to Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda. I was looking through some Christian quotes recently, just looking at some of the great inspirational things that many Christians from the earliest days of the church right up to the present day had said. I find, I like to sometimes just look at what other Christians have said that has been memorable, that can inspire me to serve the Lord better. Now, there's one quote I read there was from Felicity, an early Christian martyr was killed in the beginning of the 3rd century AD, where and she said this was her quote: "Now I myself suffer what I am suffering, but then there will be another in me who will suffer for me because I am to suffer for him." And I have to be honest with you, when I read that quote, I thought, I've no idea what that is talking about. That makes no sense to me. So I thought, I've got to look this up, and because now I knew that Felicity had been martyred along with another woman, Perpetua, and it was in Carthage in North Africa in 203 AD. Now I knew that much, but the fact is, in the accounts of their martyrdom, Perpetua has always been the one that gets the more attention, and the reason was that Perpetua was a noble woman who had given up her mighty status in order to be a follower of Jesus Christ and ended up being martyred. And she received a much more attention than Felicity, who was actually a slave. And so I knew a bit about these two women being martyred, but I knew more about Perpetua than I did about Felicity. So I said, I've got to look this up. And what does this mean? Now I myself suffer what I am suffering, but then there will be another in me who will suffer for me because I am to suffer for him. And what I discovered is this, that these two women were martyred along with 3 men. There were 5 of them, were all sentenced to death. And the reason they were sentenced to death was very common in early church. They would not offer a pinch of incense and say, "Caesar is Lord," as a sacrifice. And so in order to celebrate the emperor's birthday, the emperor at that time was Septimus Severus, they decided to basically feed them to the wild animals. And there was another guy, Satyrus, that whenever they sentenced these 3 men and 2 women to death, another guy, Satyrus, went before the magistrates and says, "Well, I'm a Christian too," which I find absolutely amazing. Most of us, our inclination would be to hide and hope glad we're not one of the ones being martyred. But he actually went and said to the magistrates, "Well, you're killing 5 people for refusing to sacrifice to Caesar. Well, I'm a Christian too, and I won't sacrifice to Caesar either." So there were 6 of them got executed in the end. Now, the women, they were going to be fed to the wild animals as the men were, and they were stripped naked and led into the arena. But even the crowd, who delighted in cruelty, began to complain and shout and boo at how these women were being treated. So instead, they were taken out of the arena again. They were dressed in their clothes. Then they were led back in fully clothed, and there they had gladiators to cut their throats. Now, the thing was that while they were in prison waiting for their execution, Felicity, the slave, was pregnant. And it looked like, because of the due date of the baby, that she would not be allowed to be executed along with her friends, because it was against the law to execute a pregnant woman. And so they had to wait until after she'd had the baby. Now, you'd think in that case, perhaps the way we think would be to say, well, if I was Felicity, I would hope that the baby took as long as possible to come. But actually, she was actually annoyed about this, because she said, "I want to die alongside my fellow believers, not to be executed together with criminals and murderers." And so she prayed to God and asked for a miracle, that the baby would come early, and the baby was born early and healthy. And so she gave the baby to be looked after by relatives. But the thing was, when she was giving birth to her child, the labour pains were upon her, and the prison guard was laughing at her and mocking her and saying, "If you can't stand this pain, then what's it going to be like when you get led into the arena and executed?" And that's when she said, "Now I myself suffer what I am suffering, but then there will be another in me." In other words, she's saying there won't be a baby in me anymore. She says, "But then when I go out to suffer, there will be Christ in me who will suffer for me, that Christ will take the suffering upon himself, as he did upon the cross, because I am to suffer for him. And so she went out willingly to die for Christ, knowing that Christ was in her and Christ would help her to bear the suffering on that day. So that makes sense of the quote now. And you have to admire these early witnesses in the Christian church that were so sold out for Jesus. They were prepared to lay everything down for the Lord. May we be equally sold out for Jesus. So Felicity said, now as she was giving birth, now I myself suffer what I am suffering. But then there will be another in me who will suffer for me, because I am to suffer for him. God bless you today, and join us again tomorrow for another Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda.